Welcome to Senior Living Visionaries, a podcast for senior living leaders who are looking to stay ahead of the curve in the industry. On this show, we feature leaders and innovators in senior living who are pushing the boundaries and creating new, effective services and solutions. And now, let's settle in as host Jennifer Drago connects us with today's guests.
Hi, and welcome to Senior Living Visionaries, where we showcase the innovators, disruptors, and best practices in the senior living industry. I'm your host, Jennifer Drago, strategy and governance consultant and owner of Peak to Profit Consulting. Today, I'm going to do a solo episode, and I'm going to talk about some of the foundational roles and responsibilities of board members. I am such a strong proponent of having a strong board and taking time to intentionally invest in your governance structure as well as your board education. In senior living organizations, unfortunately, what I've seen for many smaller organizations, sometimes larger organizations, is that they don't take time to intentionally invest in their board members and therefore, or even the structure, and therefore they may not have robust board, may not have enough board members. They may not have board members who contribute regularly and are engaged in overseeing or providing that oversight that is a key part of their board role. So board governance is such an important part of an organization's competitive advantage. When you have strong, educated board members that understand their role, they are doing everything that they can to ensure that the organization has the adequate resources to do its job, that it has strong leadership, that it has strong financials, and most importantly, the strategic direction that it needs to get to whatever that long-term vision is of the organization. So board members play all of those roles and more. And so if you are a board member, let's go ahead and talk about some of these roles and responsibilities, and hopefully it'll be a nice refresher for you. If you're a nonprofit leader, this is a reminder that you want to go ahead and showcase or highlight these roles and responsibilities with your board members on a regular basis. I recommend annually. It's really easy to forget why we're on a board. Sometimes it feels an honorary position, or it's just a custom that we do in the organization. And there are really important duties and responsibilities that we're going to talk about. So it's important to highlight those at the board level on a regular basis. So let me go ahead and share with you some of the duties and responsibilities. So according to the National Council of Nonprofits, board members are fiduciaries who steer the organization toward a sustainable future. And they do that by adopting sound ethical and legal governance and financial management policies, as well as by making sure the nonprofit has adequate resources to advance its mission. Kind of in a nutshell, some of the things we're going to be talking about, but that fiduciary responsibility and the stewardship of the organization's resources are really important keys here as we move forward. Okay, so let's talk about the legal duties of board members. And again, you can actually refer to your state statutes to see if there's any additions to these, but these are the three that are kind of ubiquitous and apply to all nonprofit board members. Okay, so the first is a duty of care, and this is ensuring prudent use of the organization's assets. Now, remember that a nonprofit does not have shareholders, of course, and so the assets of the organization are owned by the community or by the community that's being served by the nonprofit's mission. And so the board is the steward of those resources, and their responsibility is to ensure that the use of those assets is prudent and responsible. And that includes making sure that your facilities are in good maintenance, in good order, that you're taking care of your facilities, that you're taking care of your people and doing right by them from an HR perspective, and also the organization's goodwill and its reputation. So assuring that the nonprofit's operations are additive or accretive to the organization's goodwill. So this involves making informed decisions as a steward of the organization, especially as it relates to the financial management of the organization, because that's something that's going to ensure the strength of those assets, or if it's not appropriate, deplete those resources. The second duty is a duty of loyalty, and that's ensuring that the nonprofit's activities and transactions advance its missions. So that's, as a board member, making sure that the decisions that the board makes are in the best interest of the nonprofit, and also, as a board member, making sure that those decisions are not in the best interest of any individual board member. So this is where conflict of interest and assuring that you don't have conflict of interest, but that those potential conflicts are managed appropriately comes in, is under the duty of loyalty. The last duty is the duty of obedience, and that's ensuring the nonprofit obeys applicable laws and regulations, whether those are federal, state, county, city, any laws or regulations that are applicable in their environment, that it follows its own bylaws and adheres to the corporate stated purposes and mission of the organization. So those are the three key duties. I'm sure you've probably heard of those before, but these are important because they are actual legal duties that are part of the nonprofit code, if you will. Other key responsibilities of board members, and these again are pretty standard as it relates to nonprofits in particular. The first is setting strategic direction. There are three of these key responsibilities first as well. And so setting strategic direction is the first of those three responsibilities. And that involves helping to craft the long-term vision of where the organization is headed. Where are we headed? Because our strategic priorities are going to help drive us toward that destination. The board is also responsible for setting those strategic priorities. So it gives the organization its strategic direction and holds the chief executive responsible for enacting that strategy or executing on that strategy. So they assure that annual goals are in place that advance those strategic priorities, and that the chief executive is ultimately held responsible or accountable for achieving those annual goals, sharing those annual goals and the responsibility with the appropriate staff. But ultimately, the chief executive is the one that's responsible for accomplishing those annual goals. And then the board also should periodically review the organization's mission and make sure that it's still relevant in the current operating environment. Sometimes there's a thought that the mission has to stay the mission forever, and that is not true. It doesn't change very often generally, but the board is the one responsible for helping to craft that mission or adjust it when that mission adjustment is necessary. This is a key responsibility of the board, and it can't really be given to the staff by themselves. So sometimes in organizations, what I'll see is the staff will get together, or the chief executive will write the strategic plan and bring it to the board for approval. And that's not really a best practice. The best practice is that the board as a whole should be involved in setting that strategic direction and putting together the strategic plan, often with the chief executive, usually with the chief executive, and often with some of the key leaders of the organization as well. Another key responsibility of the board is ensuring that the organization has the necessary resources to advance its mission and achieve its goals. And first and foremost on that list is assuring capable leadership. So the board is ultimately responsible for recruiting and hiring the chief executive. We're going to talk about evaluating the chief executive on the next section, but they're responsible for hiring the chief executive. The chief executive then is responsible for hiring their team and is held accountable for their team and the accomplishment of their team's goals as well. The board is also responsible for ensuring that the organization has adequate financial resources to serve its mission, to conduct its programs. That may include assuring that there's a fundraising plan if philanthropy is a big part of advancing those programs or performing those programs. The board may need to ultimately have responsibility for assuring a fundraising plan is in place. Sometimes in smaller nonprofit organizations, the chief executive would really like the board to be involved in fundraising. Well, the best way for a board to be involved in fundraising, in my opinion, is being an advocate or an ambassador for the organization and making those connections. And that's the next bullet, is using their connections to actually help the chief executive and their team to meet the right people who can assist from a fundraising perspective, or our potential donors. So the board is really important in opening those doors and being an ambassador of the organization and being able to sing the organization's praises. And that, I believe, is a really appropriate role for a board as it relates to fundraising. Some boards have other responsibilities as well. For example, board members may be required in organizations to give a meaningful gift as a donor to the organization, whatever is meaningful to them. And the reason that that's important is many grant-making organizations, if you're an organization that goes for federally funded grants or, any kind of public foundation money or grant-making organizations will often require you to provide a list of board members and who has contributed to the organization. And the gold standard is they want to see that 100% of board members are contributing to the success of the organization from a financial standpoint. So that is pretty common as well. And then the other thing that the board helps to do is ensure that the organization has a positive public image, because of course that helps the organization to be successful on all fronts. And then the final key responsibility is providing several levels of oversight to the organization. So first and foremost is financial oversight. If you're a board member, you should be reviewing the organization's financials every time you meet, at least quarterly, but optimally you would want to see those financials. If you meet on a monthly basis, you would want to see the financial statements on a monthly basis or bi-monthly basis, depending on what your meeting schedule is. You'll also want to provide programmatic oversight, and that is just reviewing the programs and services of the organization and doing that on a regular basis to make sure that the programs are still relevant to the community's needs, whatever community that you're serving, and that the programs are still viable, that the funding mechanism hasn't changed for them, or that the expense mechanisms haven't changed in a way that now makes those programs no longer financially viable. And that's an important role of the board. Legal and ethical oversight, we've already talked about, making sure that through that duty of obedience that the organization is adhering to all rules and regulations. And this is part of that role, is providing that oversight. And then finally, but maybe most importantly on this one, I don't know, financial oversight is still pretty important, but is evaluating the chief executive. And if there's another opportunity that I think senior living organizations have, is to ensure that the board is providing a performance evaluation to the chief executive each and every year. Now, we generally have performance evaluations for all of our levels of staff, and it's important that that chief executive also gets a really meaningful performance evaluation with accolades where they're doing well and opportunities for improvement. That's going to keep the board and the chief executive very well aligned and working together to advance the mission of the organization. And so that, in a nutshell, are the three key duties of your board of directors, as well as the key responsibilities of your board of directors and of the individual directors. I hope that this has been helpful as a foundation for governance. And again, I recommend that everyone review these key duties and key responsibilities of board members on an annual basis. It's just such an important reminder for the work that we do. I want to thank you for watching or listening to this episode of Senior Living Visionaries, where we showcase the innovators, disruptors, and best practices in the senior living industry. And today we've definitely talked about a best practice in governance, and that is sharing these messages about the key duties and responsibilities of board members on a regular basis. I hope that you'll subscribe to Senior Living Visionaries on your favorite podcast platform or at seniorlivingvisionaries.com so that you can be notified of each new episode. That's it for today, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Senior Living Visionaries podcast and radio show, where we showcase the leaders and innovators in the industry who are pushing the boundaries and setting the stage for the future in senior living and services. Join us next time as we share the bold ideas and breakthroughs of the industry's most forward-thinking leaders here on Senior Living Visionaries.